Alright, hello everyone and welcome to NFL Discussion. I'm your host and NFL enthusiast Nicky Doug. In today's episode I'm going to be discussing some takeaways from the Week 8 slate of Sunday action of the 2022 NFL season. So just to do some overall takeaways, you have one team in the NFC still unbeaten, one team in the AFC, hindered at the moment by their quarterback's turnover tendencies, a potential contender emerging out of the NFC South to win that division, and also the team most likely to win the NFC West. And with that, we'll go ahead and get right into the action, starting with the Eagles, who are flying high without a strong contender in sight. On Sunday, the Eagles dominated the Steelers, but that wasn't the biggest takeaway. Rather, it was the undefeated Eagles looking like the league's best team, and it is possible that they reach 10-0, given that their next 3 games are against the Texans, Commanders, and Colts. Now, the Texans went into Week 8 with the worst record in the AFC, and they still have the worst record in the AFC by virtue of losing their game to the Titans. The Commanders, Carson Wentz went down, so they're starting their backup quarterback Taylor Heineke, and while he is a serviceable fill-in starter, Washington hasn't scored more than 23 points since Week 2. They did get a win here, though. Well, actually, they did score more than 23 points in this game. In a game against the Colts, I do believe. They got the win against the Colts. So, I mean, they played and they picked up a couple wins. They do play a pretty good brand of football, but you think about who Heineke's beaten in the Packers and the Colts, and then compare those two teams to the Eagles. Yeah, I guess you can kind of see it. The Colts, they benched Matt Ryan and turned the offense over to a second-year single caller in Sam Ellinger, who was making not only his first start against the Commanders, but also throwing his first regular season pass. He did not win, by the way. Perhaps the Packers figure out how to turn around their season by Thanksgiving and are able to challenge the Eagles in Week 12, but that's not a given. After their loss to Buffalo, they are now currently on a 4-game losing streak. And with the Eagles 7-0 start in their upcoming schedule, this team is in prime position for the first round bye in the postseason. And though a lot can happen between now and January, as I said, prime position, they're set up well to challenge for that number 1 seed. Take that number 1 seed. The Jets. So their progress is limited by Zach Wilson's high turnover tendencies. So the Jets had been stacking wins over the past 4 weeks, but questions still remained about Zach Wilson, who managed games in that stretch, throwing for just 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. In Week 7, the Jets would lose their starting running back Breece Hall and one of their starting offensive linemen in Elijah Vera Tucker for the season, which would put more on Wilson's plate in order for the Jets to beat the Patriots in this game. And on Sunday, Wilson did throw the ball more than 26 times for the first time since Week 4, but he went 20 of 41 passing for 355 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, and what was a loss. The second-year quarterback moved the ball well through the air, but tossed interceptions on back-to-back drives in the second half. As was the case last year, Wilson has more interceptions than passing touchdowns for the season. In the coming weeks, the Jets will probably feature James Robinson more alongside Michael Carter in a 2-man backfield. It takes some pressure off of Wilson, but the young single caller must improve his decision-making in the pocket to avoid taking his team out of games. He's still young, he's just 23, so he has some time to figure it out and cut down on turnovers, but he does have to make some significant strides in that regard and improve his inconsistent ball placement. Falcons. So, after their win against the Panthers, they are in first place in the division, and they look like the best team in the division. They look like contenders to win the NFC South. So this was a thrilling matchup for the top spot in the NFC South between the Panthers and the Falcons, which went into overtime. Now the Panthers, they were told they were supposed to tank after they fired Matt Rule, their head coach, and they are still refusing to tank for a top draft pick with interim coach Steve Wilkes. Granted, it was a missed field goal that kept them from winning the game, But yeah, so close. As for the Falcons, they won 4 of their last 6 games and took advantage of the Buccaneers' loss to the Ravens in impressive fashion. Playing this game without their lead rusher and top 2 starting quarterbacks, they found a way to win a competitive contest with a lot at stake. As one would expect, the Falcons did give up yards through the air without their lead coverman on the boundary, but head coach Arthur Smith stuck to what has worked for the Falcons, and that is their run-first formula on offense, racking up 167 yards on the ground with their running backs and quarterback handling the load. So Mariota did throw a couple of picks. He made enough plays for it to help Atlanta seal the victory. In Week 5, the Falcons did have a close matchup with the struggling Buccaneers that included a bad roughing the passer call, which basically gave the Buccaneers the win. So perhaps when the time comes for these teams to meet, or perhaps when the time comes and these teams do meet again in Week 18, that will be a higher stakes matchup with the division title on the line. A lot of time between now and then, but looking ahead right now, who could challenge the Buccaneers? Falcons seem best positioned to do just that. Well, I guess the Panthers too, but realistically speaking, or maybe not realistically speaking, but given their win on Sunday, Falcons do seem better positioned to challenge the Buccaneers than the Panthers. Seahawks. So, is it time to start believing in Geno Smith's career rebirth and the Seahawks as playoff contenders? It probably is. Most people probably already believe, Seahawks fans especially. Me, on the other hand, it was not that I never believed in it, I just never knew what to make of it. I did throw in the towel on the Seahawks like in Week 3, and now I'm going to have to rethink that one. I might have to make a in-season rescinding and changing up, throwing in the towel and reversing that decision maybe. I'll think about it. I might just do it. But ultimately, the Seahawks have continued to impress week in, week out. And whatever you thought about Geno Smith from his time with the Jets, Giants, and/or Chargers, forget about it. His career has been revitalized with the Seahawks, and he's a 2022 Comeback Player of the Year candidate, along with Saquon Barkley. With Smith at the helm, Seattle beat one of the league's hottest teams in the Giants, who came into this game with a 6-1 record. Seahawks never fell behind in this contest and pulled away from a 13-13 tie, a couple of fourth-quarter touchdowns. Smith does deserve some credit, going 23 of 34, passing for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns. But you also got to give some credit to his wideouts and Metcalf and Lockett, who combined for 11 catches, 118 receiving yards, and 2 scores. Kenneth Walker also should get some credit as well for as he put the game away on the trip to pay dirt with 5:28-22 left in regulation. The Seahawks have won 4 of their last 5 games with double-digit margins. In the last 3 victories. Coming into Week 8, Smith led the league in completion rate, and Walker continues to provide offensive balance on the ground. At 5-3, the Seahawks are surging, lead the NFC West, and find themselves in the mix among the top teams in their conference. So that wraps up pretty much the afternoon slate. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, starting with the Packers. Aaron Rodgers completed 19 of 30 passes for 203 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So in fairness to Rodgers, his touchdown pass to Romeo Doubs was flawless. But other than that, most of his passes came on short balls to the flats or over the middle, and the Packers essentially looked like they were giving up in the second half by running the ball over and over again, and then followed it up with 10 minutes of drive, because they had 10 minutes of drive in the second half that led to 1 field goal, 1 fourth down stop. You know, if Smith was coaching his team, he would be very proud of that. But then also confused because Rodgers would then lead a touchdown drive with passes in the fourth quarter that did result in a touchdown pass that was a beauty as well. I guess silver line for the Packers coming off this loss. They get the Lions barely there defense in Week 9. Although the question does have to be asked about the Packers. Is it too little too late? They've lost their 4th straight game and have failed to score more than 22 points in each of those defeats. Time might be running out for them to stay in the conversation as contenders, not only in their division. The Vikings won, so now they're 6-1, but perhaps the postseason. it is a bit of dire straits, and I know Rodgers is going to be Mr. Positivity, and I respect it, and I appreciate it, but ultimately, one has to be realistic and wonder if the Packers are starting to turn into pretenders instead of contenders. I ain't quite out on them yet, but I think really, as the broadcast pointed it out, you look at the Bills offense, you look at the Packers offense, you look at who Josh Allen is throwing the ball to, you look at who Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball to. It speaks for itself. As for the Bills, Josh Allen completed 13 of 25 pass attempts for 218 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 unnecessary interceptions that were honestly equal parts his fault and equal part game calling. Also, he had 6 rushes for 49 yards. So Buffalo's passing attack seemed a little preoccupied with a feud with Jair Alexander that started in the tunnel between Diggs and Alexander, and pretty much carried out from there throughout the second half, and probably factored into some weird passing decisions despite the run game performing well. Allen was picked twice with a big lead and sailed a few balls high over the middle to get the Packers back on the field. And as NBC Sports Edge said, big whoop. Want to fight about it? I don't, but I guess they do. Allen has emerged not only as a great leader, or he has emerged as a great leader, not just a great talent. So, looking at Allen growing over the years, he's not only grown as a player, he's grown as a leader of this team, and you see it with the way he plays on the field. And there is something to be said about the best teams having the best leaders, and that appears to be the case with the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. And in Week 9, they will get to play the Jets, so get to have a little divisional game right there. But yeah, complete team football from the Bills. Ultimately, those interceptions were certainly curious, to say the least, but maybe let's not be so over-reliant on completely unloading when pretty much you got the game in hand. That's just not saying you need to just run the ball and be overly conservative, but we don't need to get crazy when the game is in your hands. Don't try to give it away. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why you're trying to give away the game. The Packers didn't want it. They did not want it. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of NFL Discussion. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that like button down below.